If you love ghost stories, mysteries, and spooky tales, you definitely should not miss this. Today, I have another chilling story to share, which I received thanks to a kind friend who sent it to me for review and retelling. This story is about James, who recounted his frightening experience while working as a housekeeper in a large house. If you're ready, let's dive into the story. This incident dates back about 10 years, during a time when James was unemployed. He had previously worked at a small factory in the Bang Na area, but after the factory shut down, James found himself unsure of what to do next. With limited education, finding a new job was quite challenging. Driving a taxi wasn't an option either, since James wasn't familiar with the city's routes, having moved to Bangkok only a few years earlier. One day, a friend from his old job at the factory called him and said he was now working as a gardener at a house. The friend mentioned that another house owned by their employer's family nearby was looking for someone to take on a similar role. Knowing that James was searching for work, his friend recommended him to the homeowner and suggested James visit to discuss the job. Excited by the opportunity, James decided to give it a try. The job sounded straightforward, maintaining the garden and ensuring the house was in order. It even came with accommodation and 3 meals a day, which made the offer even more appealing. The following morning, James eagerly went to the house. When he arrived, he saw that it was a large house with an equally expansive garden. After standing at the gate for a while, a housekeeper came to greet him and let him in. James explained that he was there for an interview for the gardener position. The housekeeper escorted him into the property, where he met the homeowner. The homeowner explained that the house was relatively new and rarely occupied. They needed someone who could take care of the garden and oversee the house in their absence. The conversation went smoothly, and the homeowner appeared friendly and approachable. After some discussion, the homeowner showed James to the bedroom he would use if he got the job. The room was located at the back of the house. The homeowner also explained that a housekeeper would come once a week to handle cleaning, so James's responsibilities would primarily involve maintaining the garden and overseeing the property. When the homeowner asked James when he could start, James, eager for work, replied that he could begin immediately. By the end of the day, James had secured the job and returned home feeling elated. The surroundings were eerily silent. After exploring the house and settling in, James decided to call it a night and went to bed. Let me describe James's bedroom briefly. Upon entering, a 5-foot bed was positioned at the center. The room wasn't very large. To the left was the bathroom door, and to the right were a dressing table and a wardrobe. Near the entrance, next to the door, there was a window. The room was well equipped, even featuring air conditioning, but being in an unfamiliar place made it difficult for James to sleep soundly that first night. He drifted off eventually without realizing it. The next morning, James woke up early. His tasks for the day included watering the garden and removing weeds around the property. While working in the garden, he heard a noise near the fence. Turning to look, he saw a man standing on the other side, holding onto the fence. James smiled and walked over to introduce himself. The man introduced himself as Tim. He asked James, "Are you new here? I haven't seen you around before." James responded politely, explaining that he had just started working there the day before. Tim continued, "How was your first night? If you ever need anything or have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd be happy to help. I'm the housekeeper for the house next door." Hearing this, James felt relieved to have a neighbor who could offer support and advice. He thanked Tim and returned to his gardening. Life at the house continued uneventfully for the next 3 to 4 days. The work remained simple, mostly involving garden maintenance and keeping an eye on the property. But one night, James noticed something unusual. The atmosphere around the house felt different. Normally, there would be some background noise, crickets chirping, or faint sounds from nearby houses. That night, however, it was eerily silent, with not a single sound to break the stillness. The silence was unsettling and made the place feel more isolated than ever. James went to bed early as usual, though he couldn't shake a vague sense of unease. Trying not to overthink, he forced himself to sleep. In the middle of the night, James was startled awake by a loud sound. It resembled the creaking noise of a rope being pulled tightly against a beam. Wide-eyed, he lay still for a moment, listening carefully. The noise seemed to come from outside. He slowly turned his gaze toward the window, looking through the slats. The curtains partially obscured his view, making it difficult to see clearly. The sound gradually faded as James sat up on his bed. Deciding to investigate, he cautiously approached the window. Using one finger, he gently pulled the curtain aside and peered out, scanning both left and right. Everything appeared normal. He stayed by the window for about 5 minutes, ensuring there was nothing unusual. Convinced it was safe, James turned to return to bed. But as he moved, his eyes locked onto something that made his blood run cold: feet. A pair of feet was dangling in midair, perfectly aligned with his eye level. Frozen with fear, James's gaze slowly traveled upward. What he saw next left him utterly terrified: a man's body hanging from a water pipe above the ceiling. The man's face was horrifying: bulging eyes, swollen veins, and a tongue protruding grotesquely from his mouth. The figure swayed slightly, lifeless yet unnervingly present. James was paralyzed, trembling with fear. He couldn't move or even scream. Suddenly, the hanging figure began to sway more noticeably, rocking back and forth. The sheer terror of the moment overwhelmed James, leaving him rooted to the spot. Then, a voice whispered in his ear, close enough to send shivers down his spine. "Would you like to try?" When James heard those chilling words, he blacked out and had no memory of what happened next. The following morning, James woke up to sunlight streaming through the window, finding himself lying on the floor of his room. His pants were soaked with his own urine, a stark reminder of the terror he had experienced the previous night. As he gathered his thoughts, he looked toward the spot where he had seen the hanging man. To his surprise, the ceiling panel was intact, with no sign of disturbance. After sitting in silence for a while, James managed to pull himself together, took a shower, and began his daily tasks, determined to ask Tim about the room later. While working, James kept glancing toward the fence, waiting for Tim to show up. Sure enough, after a while, Tim appeared, leaning against the fence as usual. James quickly walked over to him and asked, "Tim, is there something wrong with this house?" Noticing James's pale and anxious expression, Tim told him to stay calm and began explaining. Tim revealed that James wasn't the first housekeeper to take on this job. In fact, 3 or 4 others had come before him, but none stayed for more than a week. Those who started around the time of a full moon or religious observances like Wan Phra, Buddhist holy day, often left even sooner. Tim shared that all the previous housekeepers experienced the same thing. They encountered the spirit of a man hanging above the bed. The man, Tim explained, was a former housekeeper who had worked in the house for about 2 years. The incident occurred just last year. The former housekeeper had a girlfriend who worked as the maid for the same house. One day, they had a massive argument that led to the girlfriend resigning and moving out the next day. The housekeeper tried to reconcile with her, but to no avail. Eventually, he discovered that she had found someone new. Heartbroken, he fell into deep depression. He stopped eating and sleeping and became increasingly withdrawn. One morning, the homeowner noticed that the housekeeper hadn't come out to work and went to check his room. They found him hanging from a pipe, lifeless. Since then, every new housekeeper has encountered his ghost, particularly on Wan Phra nights. Hearing this, James felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The terrifying experience from the previous night still haunted him, but quitting the job immediately would leave him unemployed again, a risk he couldn't afford. Later that day, James decided to call the homeowner and share everything that had happened. The homeowner listened calmly and apologized for not disclosing the house's history earlier. They explained that they had tried various rituals, including making merit and inviting monks to perform blessings, but the spirit of the housekeeper never left. James proposed a solution. He would continue working but requested permission to sleep elsewhere on lawn for nights. The homeowner agreed to the arrangement. From then on, James continued working at the house without incident. He stayed for about 3 years, during which time the homeowner eventually decided to sell the house. James moved out when the sale was finalized, leaving the haunted house behind. And that, my friends, is the chilling story James kindly shared with me. I want to thank him for allowing me to retell his experience for you today. If you have your own terrifying or mysterious stories you'd like me to share, feel free to send them to the email address below. Before we wrap up, please consider subscribing to this small channel to support us, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on new uploads. If you have any specific types of stories you'd like to hear, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.